Hi, I'm just from Canine Perspective, and we're back with another how-to video. This one's going to be with e-collar, and it's going to stress the concept of pressure on, pressure off, and we'll be using the place command to show this concept. Pressure training is the best form of training in my opinion, especially with remote collar. No matter what style of training you're doing, whether it's positive reinforcement purely or if you're applying aversives as well. And the pressure can be applied through a gentle leader, prong collar, slip leash, slip chain, e-collar. Again, in my opinion, e-collar is the best one. I've already determined Millie's working number at the moment, which is 25. And I'm going to talk more about the pressure on, pressure off concept. So essentially, it's pressure on when you need the dog to do something, pressure off once they comply. Okay? And I'm going to demonstrate this with the different tools that I have here available to me. For this one's going to be the e-collar. So when I'm pressing the button, I say the word tap, that means I'm actively pressing the button. So tap, 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 or tap, 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 tap is what it would look like. Is when I'm pressing that button, it's causing a contraction, and that contraction is being interpreted as pressure. The pressure is uncomfortable, and this is what makes it effective. If there's nothing that's uncomfortable to concern the dog to shut it off, then it makes whatever it is you're teaching to be unreliable, because there's no reason to do it, okay? So pressure, the concept of pressure is all over the place. You have experienced it most likely, especially if you drive. The most common example that I give is when you're driving and you're on the expressway and someone's behind you and they're really close to your bumper. It makes you feel uncomfortable. So some people may switch lanes, some people speed up, some people don't do anything, others may what's called brake check and hit the brakes to get the person to give them space. You're responding to that pressure, that uncomfort that you feel from having them so close to the rear end of your car. So this is the same concept here. So that would be spatial pressure. Here we're using what I would call electric pressure, which is the remote collar. Okay, so what I'm going to do with Millie here to make this very an exaggerated visual is I've not worked with Millie. Her owners may have. They've volunteered her for us to use for these videos. So here I'm on 25, and I have Millie at a considerable distance from the placemat, which is about 2 to 3 feet. I have my leash shorter to give me much more immediate direct control to help guide her to where she needs to go. And on 25, I'm going to go tap, 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 tap. Good. Now the moment all of Millie, which means all 4 paws, is on the placemat, I stop tapping. So I started tap, 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 and then just as she flushed on, and I marked it with good. The good is optional; it's not necessary. The sounds that I use are really more for the human than it is for the dog. I train dogs myself without any words all the time, but for you to understand that when I was saying tap, you knew when she was being remoted, and then when it turned off, when I said good, marking that I turned it off when I got what I wanted, which is her being on the mat itself. Okay, so now I'm going to release her, break. I'm not going to be putting any pressure behind this because I'm releasing her from the command. And I'm not saying the word place at the moment because this is just teaching her what to do and how to interpret this in this kind of context. 25, tap, 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 good. Again, about 3 to 4 taps and about a 4-foot distance here. So now, if I start to move around, because of the pressure, Millie should not come off. Millie is learning when this turns on, this remote, this contraction, to turn it off, what she needs to do in this context is to get on the placemat. And as long as she's on the placemat, nothing happens. Okay? Now, if she were to prematurely jump off of the placemat, I would kick in with pressure again to guide her back on until I myself release her. I never want the dog to prematurely leave a command without permission, because then they learn that they can essentially break the command on their own accord, and that makes her training unreliable. Okay, break. Break tells Millie her job is done, and she's able to come off safely without the risk of remote. 25. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, 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 good. So there was more tapping involved. I was a little bit further away. And I use a little bit of leash pressure to help her connect the dots. Break. So the reason why I do this, because most people would walk the dog all the way to the placemat, is that it removes part of the thinking process for the dog. However, if I keep them at a distance, like so, this is about 4 to 5 feet, and I don't move, and it's just this tool paired with the leash to direct her, for her to figure out how to turn it off, there's a lot more thinking going on, in my opinion. This means the dog retains the lesson better. It also makes it mean more because of the remote pressure. So on 25, tap, 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 right there. So it's about 4 taps, and I stopped before she got on because I could already see she was headed straight to the spot. So there was a delay. There's about 3 taps before she decided to actively do something. That's the thinking process. That's the time frame in which the dog is going, I don't like this, how do I turn it off? Break. So by starting at this stage, I remove a bunch of stages of work, because when you're training, how you train is what you're creating. So if every time I tell Millie place and I were to bring her like this, it means every time you send her, you have that built into the command. It's part of the visual for the dog. Right? So I want to remove myself right from the beginning because it doesn't affect the training. It just allows me to skip steps and start working on the core subject, which is I want the dog to learn when you hear this word or you feel this in this context, right here, it'll turn everything off. Tap, 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 tap. Good. Right there. And it's very subtle, very little leash pressure to direct her. Just enough to guide her where to go. The more you do for the dog, the longer it's going to take you to train your dog to learn what to do. Okay? Break. I understand that everybody wants to... Break. I understand that people want to help the dog because the dog doesn't understand what's going on, and I get it. No matter how much you work with your dog, they won't understand the reasoning behind why them going there is important and why they must do it, other than the fact that there's going to be pressure behind it, okay? Not like a human would. Now here, on this last one, when I released her with the brake, I don't know if you noticed, she hesitated, and I had to pull her a little bit, because of pressure, she's going, well, you keep repeating this, and going there keeps the pressure off. So I'm going to opt to stay in here. But I, of course, released her. So I had to direct her off with a bit more pressure, and she was hesitant because she's thinking this is going to go off again. It's part of the process. It's actually, in my opinion, a good thing to see, because it means that the obedience is meaning something to the dog. It means the dog is being hesitant and cautious about what they do because they don't want to risk the remote going off. And this is what helps resolve issues like leash reactivity and reactivity in the home and aggressive type behaviors or anxiety and things like that. It's just a constant pressure and the brain not going to certain spaces or decisions that would be otherwise unhealthy and when applied in the human world, like reactivity and stuff. So 25, tap, 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 tap. Good. Good. So took a little bit longer on that one. And for that one, instead of using just the leash, I took one step actively forward to help give her a little bit of guidance. But the reason why I did one step is if I would have just jumped to the conclusion of she's not going to get it, and I just walk, again, I'm doing all the work. So I want to refrain as much as possible from doing too much for the dog. Then I guided her. My arm went as far out as it could, and I took one step like this to give me a little bit more range, and she went. If she still had trouble, I would take another step, and then another step. But there's a lot of time in between those steps. Break. Two. Good girl. Time between those steps to let the brain think and troubleshoot through the problem as much as possible. Okay? 25. Tap. 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 Good. Right there. Now, I can see where she's locking up and she's getting a little hesitant with going to the place as part of the process. To speed that up, I could go up higher on the remote here. And that's really personal preference. In this case, because this is just an instructionary video to teach the basics, I'm going to just leave it as it is, and it would just be repetition. So when we're teaching the command, we're picking battles, and because there's two phases to this. The first phase is just teaching the dog to go there with pressure on, go there, pressure off, good. The next phase would be to be able to send the dog from anywhere, and also them staying there for a period of time. So right now I'm just worried about teaching Millie when you feel this right now, just go here and it turns off. The next step would be, okay, you go here and then you're going to stay there for like another 15, 20 minutes until I release you with the break command. So if Millie broke off of this prematurely, all I would do is kick in with pressure and she should direct herself right back. I would most likely have to use the leash. So in the beginning I do use the leash. I leave the leash on the dog to help guide and limit range of motion. But it's really that simple. Okay, so then the dog goes, well, if you send me here, pressure goes away. And if I try to sneak off, pressure will turn on without any warning. And the only way to turn it off is to get back to the placemat. And the only way to avoid it is just not to get off the placemat in the first place. Okay, so it's a very simple subject. So pressure on when you need the dog to do something, pressure off once they comply. This applies to the sit, the down, the place command, the recall, the heel command, and it can also be layered over other commands as well, but those are like the general family pet obedience commands: sit, down, stay, come, heel, and place. Those 6 commands are the, the most common ones amongst the family pet style dog. So this is just remote only. You can of course pair food and other positives with it, and I'm going to make a separate video for that, but this is the basic concept of pressure on, pressure off using the place command as an example. I'm Canine Perspective, and thank you for watching.